I'm on the road, so I can drink direct from the carton. My wife won't pester me about that. If you've not seen these water bottles, that's fantastic. But. Hey, well, good morning. Sorry for the rush beginning here. I was actually doing the interview, completely forgot. Oh, I'm presenting, and so I had to run down here. But my name is Buckley. I am a 7-time SharePoint MVP and Microsoft RD. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. Who's been to one of these ESPC events before? All right, so maybe you've all seen me at one of them because I've been to all of them. This is the 7th officially, so very excited to be back here and in Copenhagen because the last time I was here, I believe it was 2013, and it was snowing and icy and unpleasant. And while it's cold, I can deal with cold, but when you're slipping and your Doc Martens outside, it's this is better weather. But all right, so jumping in on this topic, navigating the inner and outer loops about effective Office 365 communications. I just want to set expectations around this. I'm going to talk about the technology, but I'm going to be talking a lot as the 100 level and the business reasons for some of the pieces. I'm going to cover some different scenarios. And this, I'm really trying to, with this session, address what's this persistent question that I hear around the world about, which tool do we use and when? And a lot of the questions to Microsoft, and we've been doing this for a couple years now since they pushed out the inner loop, outer loop messaging a year and a half ago or so, to try and answer the questions that people are asking about. Well, do I switch from SharePoint now to Teams? Do I stop using Yammer, or is it where is it? And people insist that we want this specifically what Microsoft wants us to do in each scenario with each tool. You'll never hear that from Microsoft of which prescriptive tools you use in exact scenarios. Because what is the 2-word answer to every question about how you should set up your environment in the SharePoint world? It depends. That's right. But I'm going to get through and I'm going to talk about some of the scenarios. I'm going to point you towards some resources, hopefully get you thinking about some different scenarios, things to consider, and then give you an approach for going and solving this within your organization or your customer's organization. So I want to start out by talking about the communication and collaboration in an organization, in a team, whether it's 3 to 5 people or you manage hundreds of people, and the complexity of that. I don't know if anybody has gone through like the Myers-Briggs training and organizational training. I'm a bit of a leadership development kind of a nerd. I love that side of things. In fact, instead of getting my MBA, I almost got a master's in organizational management just because I like the psychology and the sociology aspects of this. But this is as a company that's based out of Washington State. When I was at Microsoft, it was a big deal, and you'd see, I'd go in as a new employee, and I'd see these colored blocks on people's shelves in their offices, and I always wondered, like, well, what is that? And so finally, my team over in advertising operations, I had been at Microsoft a couple years, went through this exercise where you individually go through and do like the personality profile, and then the entire team does it. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to buy into this, the Myers-Briggs model and the psychology behind it, the personality types and all of that. What this shows is that all of us are a mixture of the different personality styles. However, we are stronger in certain personality styles. And actually, I don't have my bricks up here. This is to show you. So yellow, which is the drama kids, but it's the outgoing, it's the action-oriented, the creative types. Red, which is the go-getter, driver, must do, let's achieve this, project management kind of focused personality. Green, which is the supportive, like, hey man, you look like you need a hug, like those people. And then blue, which are the data. And so the Microsoft overall was very blue-red, but blue up on top of analysis and research and the data and the technology, and then the red, let's go do something. And here I was, it's a scale of 1 to 100, my personality is 82 yellow, 78 red. So I'm a collaborative, let's do it! And then like 40% hug, and then the data was like 15. It was more of a, does this need to be here? Can I hire somebody to do that? But it was interesting to do that as individually, but the value that you get out of it is not that you kind of profile yourself. You kind of inherently understand your own personality, although some would say that it is, well, that you can't. The ego has a difficult time recognizing its own flaws and that kind of side of things. But when you look at it from a team, an organizational basis, what was powerful about this, going through this type of exercise, and I've done other, when I worked for a consulting company in the early 90s, we did this brain mapping exercise, where we actually where we kind of set out the grid, and then the entire team of about 100 people stood where we were on this map. And it's fascinating to go through these exercises to look around and say, I see why I get along with these people so well. I didn't realize how closely we mapped. And that person I have a problem with at the opposite side of the map, now I get it. What's cool about that, and so further on, if you've never kind of gotten into these Myers-Briggs personality types, is it will go in and it will tell you different things about it. And it's not about you, it's about how you then relate to the other leading personality types. And so it's a powerful tool to figure out that I see that my style, where I keep butting up against this person because they are very data-oriented. I'm action, I want to just go, I want to talk to people and collaborate, but they want to do research and they want to have answers, they want to, behind that, I see why there's this conflict. And so the training then provides guidance. I'm not pitching any training, I'm just using this as an example, but the guidance is then, here's how you can best work with, get along with, and move forward with, progress with these other personality types. And so it can be very powerful inside an organization to be able to see how that comes together, how that works, and how you can get things accomplished with other organizations. And I bring this up because I know that some of you are probably wondering why are we talking about group dynamics? The main issue here is that most of the issues that we're talking about, and as technologists, we try to solve immediately with technology. The fact that these problems are people problems, not technology issues. There are high-performing teams, organizations, that are running on paper and spreadsheets and minimal tools and email. And they do that. They've come up with systems that work for their culture, but more importantly is they've understood how they work together. And they've started there, and then they build from there. And so I always look at a team like that, an organization, and think, wow, what's so much more that you could do if you could better surface your data, surface the content, collaborate, communicate more quickly. So finding that cultural fit is essential. And I don't want to get too much into like that and what cultural fit is. We're not talking about the diversity and inclusion side of things. It is the style. How do we share information? Part of the culture is also, so what are the constraints? Meaning, what are the guidelines which we must meet? Legal, regulatory, standards for your industry. All of those things fit into that culture of collaboration that you need to understand to best kind of maximize what your organization is trying to do. And then of course, there are the things which are part of that, the team culture or the company culture, as well as the role and what you're trying to accomplish in your work. But there's also, and I'll come back to this point, is around change management. I spent the first 10 years of my almost 30-year career in project management roles. So in fact, when I got into consulting at the end of the 90s, I was building PMOs for organizations, so project management organizations. So I would go into other organizations, and help them build out this more structure so that they had documentation. They were properly tracking their, their information management policies and life cycles. And a lot of this stuff was the policy, the methodology, as well as the tools, which a lot of things were very new. I built out, or helped build out in my organization. I worked for the phone company in California, the intranet. It was 1996. So, and I would go in and the concept of workflow, we actually called them workflow, but they were in binders, and you'd go look at pictures and be like, oh, I have to update that. And so I would go in, we built ours in Corel, eventually we moved to Visio, but would build out those, and then I would go walk around and have people swap out pages in their process or methodology binders. Crazy times. It's just insane to think of. Now I send them an email and say, print this out, punch the holes, and put it in your binder. So why start on this topic of group dynamics? Because, and it really comes down to what I've said. It's all about culture. So much of this and understanding how we need to work together is more important than the tools that we use. I was joking to Dan Holm, because I don't know who came to this event when we were here in 2013. So Dan Holm and I did a keynote, and there was and I believe it was this room, there were audible gasps when Dan shared a slide, and I actually had the slide, I forgot to put it in here, but it's pretty simple. It said in this big red box, for those that were here that remember this, it said, SharePoint doesn't matter, with white all around it, and people went, and then pause, and then there's a blue box at the other end that says, the business matters, or only the business matters. And it was this idea that, look, the technology changes, it evolves, it fits or doesn't fit, the requirements that you have. But if you don't get the business side right, the technology won't matter. That's the same with collaboration. So you think about collaboration needs, very complex. The modern collaboration, and I've got a few Microsoft slides that I'll share here. So this one, so what does it look like for your customers? You've got all these different tools, all these opposing technologies that are out there. We do not live in a world any longer where any company is on one technology stack across the board. And if you think that you have only Microsoft technology, look again. There's other pieces out there. It may be rogue or shadow IT efforts going on in some places, and that's part of the communication problem that's happening. That is usually a sign of an IT organization, not to beat up on IT, but that is not communicating as well as they could be with their end users to understand what we're providing, why is it not meeting your needs and you feel the need to go around us, where you're opening up the organization to risk. Even in your personal life, you have all these technologies, all these different devices. We have all of these customer demands that might be different by project, by these different industries, different customers, and then you have these competitors that are out there. And I like this last Microsoft slide here. There's an animated version of this. Mark Cashman shares this, but they're all available out on the web. You can see the link there out on Mark's presentation. But it's to help illustrate the fact that even within how we're bringing in information into our organization, we have very different needs. Does every project that we're working on, putting documents up into SharePoint, kicking off a workflow, sending a notification to somebody, or maybe there's some automation there where they get a notification that a new file has been uploaded from this project, that may be sufficient for some, that traditional intranet, very structured document collaboration way of working together. In most organizations, that's not enough. It may be for a project, but not every project. So depending on my interactions in this with sales, with HR, with the outside organizations, there may be different sites, different needs, different workflows and processes, different methodologies to follow, different places to go and have conversations and share information. It is very complex. Now what Microsoft is trying to do is try to really help everyone understand where SharePoint's role within that. And hopefully, if you're still confused about where SharePoint fits and all the other pieces, and after my presentation, if you still have questions, I have another session after this. Feel free to come and ask questions. But it was also covered in Tifer's keynote yesterday, again, kind of framing SharePoint, here's what it does. You have these core tenets, this is what it provides, but they're really strengthening SharePoint's role as the intranet capability, but it's also the core infrastructure that underlies all of Office 365 as well as Microsoft 365 offerings. So does SharePoint fit every scenario? No. And I forgot to put a link in here, but I'm sure some of you saw this. Everyone's seen the video. It's been demoed a few times. Last time I saw it at Microsoft Inspire in July in Las Vegas. It was at Build as well. But if you go out and find and do a search on the future of business meetings, and you'll find this demo, what they do, it's where they have a little fake office and it's open and they sit there and they go through and they demonstrate a number of different technologies, and a lot of AI that's driving these activities. This is where it's Microsoft for many, many years has done this kind of future of technology, this very futuristic, look at where things are going. Does everybody remember these little movies, mini movies that Microsoft did? Guy wakes up and he's got this piece of glass and he touches it, or his face does recognition. Suddenly it's like it's like a smartphone device thing, and as he walks into his bathroom, he swipes and suddenly TV and other stats are showing up on his bathroom mirror. I don't want that experience personally. I want to divide and conquer those things personally. But as he goes into his car and leaves his house, locks his house on his device, goes to his car, and automatically picks up and does things. And I would love that for Spotify. I don't want to have to switch speakers. We had a view of that. And what I first say about that, where everything in that world, that future vision that Microsoft shared, was everything has glass surfaces, there's a lot of people touching things. Windex is the stock to buy in the future, because you're going to be constantly wiping things down and disinfecting. But the future of business meetings, if you've not seen this video, I highly recommend that you go take a look at this. And this is where you have 4 people sitting at a table that have different roles. The system recognizes them, and as they're talking, it's doing transcription in real time, making it searchable. It does translation services. There's some people that are dialing into this, and I guess in the future we'll have this augmented reality, kind of like seeing the Jedi Masters at the council, kind of show up around you. Maybe we'll get there soon. But even before you get to the meeting, the system knows, based on your schedule, the tasks from the last team meeting, sends you reminders, says here's what we're going to be covering, here's an agenda schedule, a scheduling change. So you get that beforehand. When you get into it, the meeting, it's tracking that, it's capturing that, it's instantly, you're not having to take copious notes. What did I miss of what was asked of me out of the meeting? It's capturing that in real time. What's powerful about what the AI does within that demo and the video, why it's worth seeing from Build, is because they crosstalk, they interrupt each other. And yet the system is able to intelligently know, nope, that's Christian, no, that's Susan. They talked at the same time, but it separated that, caught both, and recorded the asks, the assignments, the tasks out of that meeting. And then afterwards, based on what was discussed, the tasks that were assigned, it then does notifications, it updates project plans, it does all of that kind of stuff, so that we're not having to go and do that, the minutia of that kind of management. It's done on behalf, and those are now searchable assets within our SharePoint environment, within our information management system. The problem with all of these things, and another popular question I get is just, how do we in the community keep up with the pace of change of all of these different pieces? It was even simpler, it was difficult still just when we were just looking at SharePoint, for those of us that from the SharePoint side of things, just to keep up with what was happening with SharePoint when it was on-prem and other things were happening. We built training schedules, we onboarded our users. Now that it's this evergreen software model, it's online, we're getting things, even if you're still on-prem, all the information that comes out monthly, there's so much that has to happen. So people say, well, how do you keep up? And the answer is, I don't. And I ask my Microsoft friends, what do you know about this? And usually they'll answer a couple things and they'll say, I know nothing about that, you need to go talk to somebody else. There's no one person that knows every answer. except Spence Harper. I think he does know all the answers. But the problem, so the question that people ask, because they want a definitive answer and they never get it, is which tool do we use and when? It's the wrong question. Because the answer, of course, is it depends. But you have a number of pies, wheels, stacks, things that are out there, all of these other things that are going on. Of course, this is already outdated because that's going away, that's gone. Maybe in your organization, you probably don't want to promote that. That no longer defines what groups is and its focus. We'll talk about that. It's constantly changing. So you always have to look at the version number of the image that you're looking at, or the slides that are being presented to you. It's the right way to focus, however, is on the use cases that are important to your organization. These are examples. I'll just say this, like, these are not the ways to think about each of these scenarios. These are just examples. It may be different in your organization. But the way I like to think about this is more of what are the front end experiences that people use. I'll tell you this, that I know that when Yammer was acquired, and those that were in space will remember this, that it was the end of email. Did that happen? No. How about when we all got our smartphones? That was the end of laptops. No. What you do is now you have, on average, to a conference like this, 2.5 devices per person. Just meant more. We have more tools, we have more options, because inherently we use the right tool for the right job. The hard part, where we need help and where Microsoft is going, where the roadmap is making sure that on the back end, architecturally, that the data, how it's shared, that is consistent across the back end. That is what we need. So I'm a very impatient person. I'm a yellow-red, come on. But the fact that we don't yet see all of the artifacts, all the data, all the conversations from our primary workloads, SharePoint, Teams, Yammer, OneDrive, Outlook, whatever it is, not everything is writing everything in the same way to the Microsoft Graph, which eventually will be able to surface all of that. But that's directionally where things are going. I'll come back to that. So you've probably seen a version of this. I've got a slightly different version of this, where to start a conversation, inner loop, outer loop. Everybody seen it? Has anybody not seen this? One brave person raised their hand. Okay, all right. So I've got a different version of it. So where to start a conversation. I'll get through this pretty quick here. All the slides you'll have. If you have any questions, you've got my Twitter, and you can email me, and my details are at the end here. So the inner loop was the way that I think of this in these scenarios. Think of like an event team. We're organizing a SharePoint Saturday. We're organizing an internal meeting on next Friday, and 3 of us need to get together and go through the details repeatedly. It's that inner loop where we need to work closely together. Do we need to make this available and visible and involve all 250 people in our organization? No. That doesn't need the outer loop, it needs the inner loop. Another example of that would be technical support, trying to solve a ticket. Does anybody work in operations, in technical support, that side of it? For years I managed TSEs and who are driven on number of tickets they close, the time a ticket is open, or the mean time to completion of a ticket. That's a key metric for them. And so when they need to solve a problem, they need to be able to go in and open up the ticket, involve 2-3 people, somebody from the product team, somebody from management to buy into the solution they come up with. They have these rapid fire conversations. Again, all 250 people in the organization don't need to participate in that. However, having said that, another TSE, not part of that loop. At some point, I'm going to go in and I see a problem with my customer. The first thing I'm going to do is go and look, has this been seen before and has it been solved before and what was done? I need to be able to get access to the data. I see the conversation, the thread, the documentation that they created for that. And instead of taking 3 hours to solve, I can solve it in 15 minutes because I go, that's exactly what we're experiencing, pull it over. If it's not transparent, they're going to repeat the wheel. if they're involved in it, they may forget about it, but they need to have some level of access. Again, that's understanding what is the culture, how do people need to access that? Do I need to participate in the moment in every single conversation, or do I just need to have a visibility into it and the searchability into that knowledge base? Project manager assembling a V team, and again, we're working on specifically, this is an internal V team across departments, and we need to collaborate on an initiative. Now you go and look at that outer loop, and so here is a situation, and I'll come to kind of my favorite use case for Yammer, but that outer loop where, like the ideation process, the executive team says, you know what, we have this problem here, we don't know where the right idea is going to come from, let's push it out there to all employees. One of my favorite stories is actually from the first SharePoint conference. I'm trying to remember if that was Vegas or Los Angeles, after Microsoft acquired Yammer. And they had, if everybody remembers, nationwide insurance was one of the kind of solid use cases. There's a great story that the CEO shared about the fact that there is a brand new employee, a support person, the lowest rung of the company, who went and asked a question, said, I see this gap, I see this issue, asked it and made it available to the entire company. Nobody for like a week answered that. The CEO read through it and then went in and replied. Now, of course, as soon as he responded to this person, so it's very flat, the involvement of that, of course, dozens of people jumped in and, I think that's a great idea, and here's something else I would suggest. There's actually data that around that specific reality and the reason why we need to have community managers that are inspiring, that are helping kind of keep things going, and people are constantly in there looking at not just the work that they're doing heads down on their tasks, but adding to the value of the larger organization. But that ideation process, when you're looking for expertise outside of your team, outside of your organization, it's this crazy thing. This is a frustration for me in a couple different companies. Maybe you've run into this, where they were saying, we're looking for expertise in this. And I said, actually, I did that for about 5-6 years at my last job. And I was actually told by a manager, that has nothing to do with your job today, to your title. Like, right, it was my last job, which I was the expert on that topic. And so I was discounted my view because my role was very different at the new company. And so I was, like this manager didn't want me to go help solve this other problem that I had. I kept saying, it's like, this is it's a company issue. Let me help solve a company issue. I realize it's away from the time, but yeah, my time on that team didn't last very long. But open discussion on other topics. Another example is that a prior company we were acquired. We went into a worldwide 3 locations, this massive all hands meeting. And as we were sitting there through this like 4-hour meeting, and people are taking notes and asking questions, and I knew that there were all these people listening in from 2 other global locations. And so I opened up Yammer. And I realized that my new company that we got acquired had this corporate Yammer. No one, didn't look like anybody had been in there about a year. Well, I created an event, a group around this event, and pushed out the invitation to everybody in the company. And instantly people started jumping in there. We started discussing what was being presented. The CEO was up talking. We started asking questions, and then a senior manager started asking questions from Yammer to this live simulcast. And what was great about this is 6 months later, we acquired another company. We went in and had a similar experience. We went into that same group, and I didn't even prompt it. Other people went and jumped in. And when people asked questions, they were searching and finding answers from 6 months previous, right there. So it became kind of a living knowledge management hub. Then you have the SharePoint, OneDrive, and Outlook. I call it the ubiquitous loop. It's always there. When do we use SharePoint or not SharePoint? We're always using SharePoint behind the scenes. If it's OneDrive, it's SharePoint there. If it's Teams, it's SharePoint. Yammer, it's all the things that you share inside Yammer, the documentation will eventually all be within SharePoint and right to the graph. Outlook, when is the right time to send an email or not send an email? That's up to you, but it's still there. It's a tool for you to go and use. And then underlying all of that, because you have groups in the graph there, and you have this common security across all of Office 365. You have this ability to go in and more and more, we're seeing this with some of the announcements that you saw in the keynotes, that we're getting a more unified and powerful administrative experience that also looks at across workloads. It's like my wish list, having worked for an ISV that was focused on governance and administration, is I would like to be able to go and set policy that had some rules at this high level, this abstraction, and could be then applied to like governance for government-related issue to every one of the workloads. That I didn't have to go and do things individually, that it had that roll-up of why, this is what we need to do, this is what it looks like in each one of these, and go and set policies at that top level. I know it doesn't entirely make sense to do that with the different workloads. Hopefully you understand what I mean there, but having that abstraction. So how does this stuff translate into Microsoft solutions? Because this is always the question. So sometimes you go in there, this is where I'm going to be appropriately vague. It depends. You've got the communication sites, of course, SharePoint team sites that are out there, the new communication sites, which are just fantastic. There's so much good things to say about what the SharePoint team has been doing. Being a SharePoint guy since 2005, I mean, it's exciting to see where things are. The new hub sites, oh man, I wish I had this when I was an admin. Because of the cleanup, the constant cleanup, and the migrations that we had to do. When I joined Microsoft in 2006, a big piece of our job was we were just doing migrations from the 2003 to the 2007 version. Then you have Exchange, Outlook. It's a valid interface. It is a collaborative tool. It's inner loop, it's outer loop, it's all loops. You then have Teams. And of course, Teams is, if you know simple math, it is SharePoint plus Exchange plus more equals Teams. I'm not going to get into what those things mean, but then you also have Yammer, you also have OneDrive, you also have, you've got those other tools and things that are subsets of those other products. Sometimes you need SharePoint, sometimes you need SharePoint and Teams. If you roll out Teams, SharePoint's already there. It's like the old Palmolive ads with Marge, you're already soaking in it. Sometimes you need SharePoint team sites as well as hub sites, and then you also want Teams for those more inner loops. Sometimes you need Teams as the front end, it's the primary thing. You're already soaking in it, SharePoint's already there, but you're also using Yammer for those scenarios. Sometimes you've got Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive is the right solution. Sometimes it's all of the above, and let's throw in a little Azure just because there's probably Azure people in there and they want some love. But there's Azure increasingly, again, if you're using Teams, if you're using OneDrive, you're soaking in Azure already. It's there, the Azure Active Directory. So there are some tools that are out there. You've probably seen some or all of these. I highly recommend you take a look if you want to better understand, because this is really the key. Like before you go, if you're focusing on culture, you're trying to understand what are our key business scenarios. In fact, if everybody has their program guide, the booklet, the magazine that was handed out when you registered, I wrote an article on there on the 6 tenets of productivity. And it basically summarizes most of what I'm talking about here in one page, which I'll then expand on in videos later. But that's the nice, succinct, short version of that. But you have these great tools out there that can help you understand, because a core part of this is understanding what do the tools do. You don't want to go recreate the wheel. If you understand what your business is trying to do, then go figure out, okay, here, Teams can do some of this, SharePoint can do, what's the best way to do that? Let's then talk to the team, experiment, pilot, and try some things. But some of the research tools, like you've probably seen this, the periodic table of Office 365 that Matt Wade put together. It's fantastic. It's actually, there's an app for this, because as it's updated, as things change, they update the app. It's free, it's out there. Highly recommend that you go have this app or take a look at the periodic table. There's other resources out there, like AppPoint did a series where they're out on their blog with some great utilities. Of course, they've got Matt Wade of the periodic table, blogs and shares content over through the AppPoint blog, so that they've provided some fantastic resources that are out there. This vendor, and I'm not familiar with them, but Arkadin, but they came up with this. I found this landing page and a bunch of tools and guidance around where they go into different styles. It's fantastic. So it's just another resource. I've got the link there. Of course, I should have done the short URL, but the things that you remember when you're standing on stage looking at your slides. For those that are looking at Teams, I highly recommend this brand new book. I think it came out in August or September. So you have two of my fellow MVPs, Melissa Hubbard and Matthew Bailey, that put this out there. Really like that. Now, if you really want to get down into the nitty-gritty of understanding the team culture and the right approach, and be a bit more, organic in your planning, to go through and really give it some thought, I love the outline of this book. It's a little bit older, but it's just a fantastic book called The Social Organization. It's not about social networking technology, but talking about communication-centric, collaboration-centric organizations. And what I love about this is that they're really, I guess I'm giving you like the short version, you don't need to read the book now, but the Cliff Notes version of this. The three primary components of this, of collaboration, are community. And the way that I describe this is kind of like, it aligns with the inner loop, outer loop, is what is the community you're trying to collaborate with? Is your community your project team of 3 people? Is your community your manager with her 10 direct reports, of which you are 1? Is that the community? Is the community your business unit of 150 people? Is the community the entire company of 10,000 people? Would you use the same technology for 3 people as the 10 people, as the 150, as the 10,000? Probably not. Not effectively, anyway. And yet, in SharePoint's history, we rolled it out, you must use this, we built it one way, and we assumed everyone would go and adopt that. How'd that work out? Right. So, understanding the community is the first of the scope. Second is the word social, but it's what is the collaboration method, the culture? How do people communicate? How do they share? It will likely be lacking. You want to improve that. That's part of what your effort is. But you can't just go in there and say, everything that you're doing today is wrong, here's the new way, do it this way. Not an effective change management strategy if you want adoption. It will not stick. So understanding this is the way people work, and it could be pilot and baby step people into that new method, that might be the right path for you. But understanding how do people communicate and collaborate. And then the third thing that's so critical and we sometimes forget is, what is the purpose of that community? Being clear on what the purpose is will help you rein in the desire to add every tool, every cool buzzword, thing, widget. Don't need it. Sometimes the answer might be, you know what, email is sufficient for that, for this need. And we'll share our OneDrive, personal OneDrive links for this method. We don't need to overthink this. So know what the purpose is. If the long-term purpose is to add to the growing, searchable, findable information management structure of your organization, you're building intellectual property and want to make sure you're capturing everything, then email may not be the right way to do that, and you may need to do something that's a little more complex. But so again, understand the purpose of what you're trying to do for that community in context of their style, of their culture, and having that shared purpose. Change is incredibly difficult. So what's the secret to change, effective change? Is it about the tools? Is it about training, just doing a one-off? And I know a lot of people say, oh, they were trained. We did training 3 months ago, and they have their binder. We can always pray. No, permanent change happens only when you can help your end users alter their behaviors. Another way, nice way of saying, fancy way of saying change. You'll have change when people change. Now, when you can alter their behaviors, alter their bad habits, or good habits, okay habits, into better habits. That's where you have lasting change. That doesn't happen when you drop in and blow up their old system and say, you must do this new way. Or do a week-long training on how do you use now SharePoint Online. There you go. Good luck, everyone. So the secret to change. So when end users are able to adapt. When they understand, here's the community, here's the method of collaboration, here's the shared understanding of what we're trying to do, they're more efficient, they are more effective in their roles, you can onboard more quickly, they're more collaborative, there's more innovation. It's funny, it's so difficult to put qualitative measurements. Everybody says, what's the value of collaboration? Like, what's the return on investment of strong collaboration? You can't tell me. No, happier people, how do you accurately measure that? Where you're sharing more. Previously lost opportunities, because if people aren't collaborating, how do we know what we lost? If people aren't talking, if they're not sharing, if they're not building off of the ideas of their peers, how do you measure what you don't know that you lost or not because it never happened because you shut down collaboration? So without lasting change, we've all seen this. You roll something out, it doesn't stick. So people are like water running downhill. They'll follow the path of least resistance. How you reach that destination, you can't go force people to do things. You have to bring them along, involve them in that process. There's a phrase I use all the time, is the more that you involve people in the process, the more likely people will support that process because they have a voice. We inherently reject the things that we are forced to do. I'm not cleaning up my room, Mom. Make me. That didn't work with my mom. She made me, and I did it. That we focus so much on process, we focus so much on the technology, we forget about the people aspect of that. So collaboration changes broad impact, of course. We can automate and streamline, get better at what we do. We can do more. Innovation is, again, a hard thing to track, because when you're sharing, there's an exponential value created when there's transparency, where there's open communication and there's sharing. If you're, so back in the late 90s, I created a company, a software company in business school, where the goal, we didn't know that we were creating a social graph. We didn't call it that. We had a product name for it called Blocks. But the idea was that we were doing pattern recognition in common activities, so that a document, Word document, knew its relationship with people, with the other documentation, with code that was being written. And so eventually, because of those patterns, we were able to speed up the delivery of a project. That's what strong collaboration does. You can do more when those connections are there. That's why I'm a big believer in the graph of the future of what Microsoft is doing with intelligent applications and all the services that they're doing. So processes are about alignment of people with technology, and then the people are really at the core there. They can adapt and change. Even I don't believe in that old adage of you can't teach an old dog a new trick. It's really just how you approach that. It might be more steps to get to that end goal, but people will change if they understand what's happening and are brought along as part of that process. So my 4 ingredients to lasting change are transparency, consistency, collaboration, and iteration. And I'm going to share a quick story. Some of you may have heard me tell this story. This is a true story. So I was working at a company, I won't name, it's called Microsoft. But I was working up on the 4th floor of this organization, and we had a difficult time. We were a shared services organization. I led a team of project managers and engineers and analysts. And we had, because we're shared services, we had an 1,800 person organization, people constantly coming in, pulling my people away. I would say, here's the direction, here's what you need to go and do. Tell them, no, this is your priority. And yet these people more senior to me would come in and take my project managers and be like, no, this is the priority I need you to work on. And kind of, and then I would have to go and report up my chain of why a project went askew because this other VP came in. And kind of bullied my employees. So came up with an idea. We had this very prolific SharePoint environment for this PMO structure, and we had weekly updates to management teams, and nobody was going to SharePoint. We knew because we were looking at the data that nobody was going in there, and then they would come and ask it for stuff. So we were pushing out the information that was available via email. They weren't opening their emails, we know, because we were tracking and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, then I had people come and say, I have no idea where this project is. Did you not see the email? Did you not look at the SharePoint? It's updated every Monday morning. And so, had an idea. So I went and requisitioned a whiteboard. Our business unit of about 120 people had to go down this one main hallway. Right off the elevators, my team was all right there off the elevators, and I installed this whiteboard on the wall in the hallway that most people had to walk past every morning. And I said to my team, at the time about 8-10 of them, I said, fortunately, we're now no longer, you can't work from home. I know some of the people had 1 or 2 days a week they work from home. I was like, that we're going to have to suspend that for now, and we have a daily stand-up meeting. And so it's this kind of agile method. I've done it at other companies. I did it as part of my own startup and a couple other startups. I said, we're implementing this. So I'm confident that everyone on my team was angry at me for forcing them to be there at 9 a.m. every morning. And it could be 15 minutes, it could be 45 minutes long, this standing meeting. And so what we would do is this, simple, kind of scrum, idea, which is, here's all the projects by priority that we're working on them, that we're currently working on, or that we've been tasked to do, that we've accepted this workload. So we built it out. We then put the names of the people working on each of those projects, and half of them had no names because my team size was limited. Throughout the day, I directed my team, and I had to do some correction throughout the first week. But I said, if any other new requests come in, put it in what we call the parking lot, which we'll discuss tomorrow morning. If it's more urgent than that, come get me, we'll together go have a conversation with this person. And so did this, of course, as we're having this stand-up meeting, everybody's coming into work, walking past this pen board, wondering what's going on. And as soon as we're done, we walk away, everybody's clear on what they're working on, what the priorities are. Of course, instantly, people that were not on my team swarmed around the board. What's going on? Hey, I don't see anybody assigned to my project. You said that it was going to be delivered on this date or whatever. And they then did their magic, went and tried to go in with my direct reports to get the priorities changed. And I'm like, you're not authorized to change those things. That's your task. You'll be in trouble with me if you go off a task. I said, I don't mean to be as harsh. My team was awesome, but I was trying to enforce this change. And so what happened over the next couple of weeks is we had a couple people freak out. I had a couple, one general manager who was very angry, and I went and said, okay, let's understand. So your project is number 4. Right now, it's not on schedule to be delivered in the time frame you want. The first 2 projects are from our VP, Anna. I'm happy to go with you over to talk with Anna to see if she will reprioritize your number 4 above her 1. He's like, no, it's not more. I said, is it more important than number 2? No, it's not. All right, this next one is from your peer. Here's what's going on. Here's the impact. This is why it's number 3. Is your project more important? No, it's not more important. Okay, you're at number 4, which is where we have you. Well, I need it moved up. Can you give me more money that I can go get more resources? Do you have other people? Can you adjust in the time? Or can you want to go negotiate with these other people? He's like, no. He was angry, went away. And he kept trying to go and change this. And what happened though is over time is that confidence was built in my team as well as in everyone in the organization of the process. They knew when they saw something that they could come to me. And I did have managers that came to me and said, I'm going to put additional funding so we can go get a contractor so we can speed up delivery of this. Brilliant, let's do that. And I would work with them. But because it was transparent and they understood the priorities, they're like, oh, I get it. No, okay, yep, we're fine. We'll adjust our schedules because that's just the reality. And that just worked out. Now, I'll just say the end of that story. It was about 2 months later of us doing this every day that my manager in one of my weekly one-on-ones said, it's like, Christian, this is fantastic that you did this. My only suggestion is it would be great to have this data in SharePoint, which is where we started and then we looked at it. But because we built trust in the process, it allowed us then to go, and we didn't just jump into SharePoint, it's already there. I pushed her the link immediately, like, hey, I went and built this because you asked. Yeah, and it was already done. But we slowly moved everybody over, they had trust then in that process, and we can make that change. So why that worked for us? So 1, we were transparent. 2, we kept going, we were consistent. It was our methodology. We explained it, we stood by the decisions. We said, let the process work. This is the right way to do this so that we can get this under control. Everyone had a voice, everybody had input, and we did make priority changes based on people coming over. We did go and negotiate changes to that. And then we constantly revise those things. So again, I'll say this, success hinges on culture. We were able to do this because this was a culture where providing the data, showing our work behind the scenes was essential to getting buy-in for that. Once we understood that and then how we were able to go make this effective change. And we got back to what we had been doing a couple months earlier, all digital. We still did some of the email pushes out there, but what happened is that because we had the buy-in, suddenly there was accountability from all those other teams. So part of this I say is like you may already have this, but creating a culture where change is part of it. So people know that, look, we're gonna learn from it. We're not gonna get everything right at the first time, but we're going to go in and modify that. And you think about that as you experiment, if you pilot with SharePoint and Teams and kind of all these other technologies to figure out what's the right mix for your organization, that's gonna be critical. I know I've got, 7 more minutes here. There's a few of the resources. So some of these things are old. To point you to, again, all the slides that you'll see here. What do you need to be successful? I mean, this is great guidance that came from, Doug Scrim and Sai from AppPoint, and a couple of Microsoft, Lindsay Gardner and Katie Larson. Some great resources a few years back. So understanding the business scenarios is key. That's where you start. What are you trying to do? And I would say add to the business scenarios comes after you understand, here's the community that we're solving for, here's the culture of that community, here's the shared purpose. Then you say, now let's define the scenarios. How does that fit within those things? How does it go outside of that where it rolls up to this other community? Then prioritize the solutions, look at what the different things can do. Sometimes one tool will do everything you need. Most times, one tool will not provide everything that you need. And so once you figure that out, understand what is possible, then commit the resources, create a plan around that, and go and execute on that. Always measure, go back, because there's going to be a way to improve. I'm a big Deming fan. You don't know W. Edwards Deming, so he always says like optimize the system. That's what operations is, ongoing optimization. Constantly looking at how can we tweak, how can we improve, how can we scale, how can we get faster, better, and technology, your business requirements all change, all those things. Now Microsoft provides a number of resources that are out there. There's Success with Teams, there's Fast Track, there's in the, it's like the, with the URL, I might have it in upcoming, but it's the resources that are out on office.com. There's a number of places that have tasks that have case studies and examples that you can go and leverage. Microsoft has learned this, and they're making all these materials more and more available. Of course, the partner community has a ton of things that are out there as well. So if you're in a specific industry and you're looking for IT pro scenarios that then focus on the different technologies, those kinds of resources do exist. So you just need to dig to find some of those things, but I think it's on the support.office.com on that site. So Microsoft guidance, I'm going to jump past a couple of these, but again, defining the scenarios. They recommend going through this visioning exercise. I do too, but I come from that project management background where I'm crazy. I like to, think about a problem before trying to solve it. But that's me. I ran into a lot of engineers that jump right in and want to code and build something because it's something cool that they saw, and they want to go build that. There's a great Dilbert comic where it's like, I know it, we can build a database. It's like, why build a database? Like, I don't know, but we like building databases. Of course, there's tons of information out there on Microsoft Teams, all the use cases that are out there, and I mentioned here, this is the main thing to go through. It's constantly being updated. Success with Teams, as you click into each one of these things, it'll take you to the core content out of the Microsoft site, to videos and other resources. I think there's some partner materials that you can get through that as well, but that's one of the many places that you can go and do. And Microsoft has provided a bunch of change management guidance, and I tried to summarize this to wrap up here. But identify the stakeholders, your champions, all the user profiles, again, within that community, that scope of that. Understand what your business scenarios are, and then conduct pilots. I've heard this a couple times from people say, it's like, well, we built a pilot, we didn't find out much. I said, well, what happened to your second pilot? What do you mean your second pilot? Like, yeah, you pilot, you learn from that. If you don't learn whether you change aspects of it and go pilot again to learn from that. So it may be that you're doing several pilots, so you roll out with one team of 10, that you go to 2 teams of 10 and 10, and build out that way, and take the key learnings in before you roll out to the entire organization. Design, launch, and manage an adoption campaign, which might have like internal awareness materials, self-help training. Define feedback mechanism is key for this. I mean, I'm a big fan of things like, the Friday brown bag lunch, where somebody, even just an end user that has solved the problem themselves, walks through and talks about their problem and how they solved it with the pilot environment or the environment that you've built out. And then do have some predefined success measures. So have goals of end user adoption. Have visibility into how people are using different sites. I always love this about like SharePoint team site metrics, to go in there. Why is this team, this organization, this business unit, why is their SharePoint environment just alive with activity, and similar structure for this other team that we built out for them is just dead, no one ever goes there? Well, because we had a culture mismatch. It fit theirs, we're not meeting their needs. And then come to find out that most of that team are going around IT and they've solved their unique problems in ways that we have no control or visibility over. I always tell people, it's like, if you got hit by a bus and all of our company intellectual property is sitting in your personal service that you've paid for with your credit card, how do I get to that? How do I do that? Tell me how that works. I like the idea of a champion program. If you have people in your organization that are maybe a little too excited about the rollout of this new technology, but you want to have as many of those people as possible. I'll tell you, that's the cheapest training right there. People that are passionate about something new, support them, give them what they need to go out and do more. And then provide that standard, the feedback mechanisms. If you're not doing that, I'm not a fan of like, we're not talking about like HR, like the 360 feedback, as part of your annual review process. No, have the mechanisms on a regular basis so people can, whether it's named or anonymous, and you decide in your culture, your organization, but have a way that people can share information. Here's part of transparency though. You have to make it visible what you're doing about those suggestions. You can't just take them in and no one ever sees it again. That causes disconnect. That is not how you make change happen. When people see that you've accepted them, you've onboarded that, and this is why you have these automated emails like, we thank you for your feedback. You are our top priority. We will get back to you. You are customer number 479. You expect to hear back from us within 7 to 12 weeks, or whatever it is. But you get some response. That all comes from this idea that even though we just heard 7 to 12 weeks, but I'm glad that went priority. I'm okay with that. People do want to have that feedback, and then have visibility once it's accepted. User voice is a great example of that as well. And then measure and share the successes. I love doing this, where we go in on a monthly basis as we report up to our VP, and I would share in that organization. I would share, like, and here's what we did. We had 27 requests that we completed here. Of the projects that came in, we were ahead of schedule. We were on. We were late on these, but overall, this is what things. And we would do kind of a miniature employer customer satisfaction survey as part of that. So we were constantly getting feedback to know, is part of our methodology broken, or are there certain employees that are not being responsive? And then adjust your messaging and methods based on that feedback, and then basically rinse and repeat. But that's how you make effective change. Listen, implement, and act on, and communicate around that. So with that, I know I rushed. It's an hour. It's so hard to get a lot of this in depth. But if you still have us trying to get the point across that, while we can talk about the technology, you get a week here of to in depth and ask very specific, granular questions about the products. And I'm happy. I'm going to be down to Ask the Experts most of the day today, and down in the community area. If you have questions about Teams or SharePoint, how these pieces come together, I'd love to have conversations with you around that. But just trying to make that core point is, underneath all of that, if you've not first gotten those things right of who are we trying to address, that community, the culture, and our purpose, it doesn't matter what the technology is, that you'll have a difficult time to be successful with that. But that's doesn't sound like a positive note to end on, but have a great day. But thanks a lot.